W.H. Auden wrote the surprisingly affecting lyric "Funeral Blues" in the late 1930s. He wrote it as part of a song for performance for a popular singer of the time, and he later revised it and published it as a poem in his own voice. And it has gotten some notoriety. Very famously recited in the movie Four Weddings and a Funeral. But it's a remarkably subtle poem in the way that it moves, and deeply moving in its subtlety. Funeral Blues. Stop all the clocks, cut off the telephone, prevent the dog from barking with a juicy bone, silence the pianos, and with muffled drum, bring out the coffin, let the mourners come. Let aeroplanes circle, moaning overhead, scribbling on the sky the message he is dead. Put crepe bows round the white necks of the public doves, let the traffic policemen wear black cotton gloves. He was my north, my south, my east and west, my working week and my Sunday rest, my noon, my midnight, my talk, my song. I thought that love would last forever. I was wrong. The stars are not wanted now. Put out every one. Pack up the moon and dismantle the sun. Pour away the ocean and sweep up the wood. For nothing now can ever come to any good. Remarkable poem. The first two stanzas make you expect that it is some public personage who is going to have a very official public funeral, perhaps. The policeman wearing the gloves makes you think that, okay, this is perhaps a person of some notoriety. I believe that was the case in the original song. It was a politician of some form. But when you get to that third stanza, and the first two stanzas were largely retained from the original song, when you get to that third stanza, it becomes so intimate. It becomes so personal. He was my north, my south, my east, my west. It is no longer a public funeral. It's something deeply private. And you can see that contrast between the two, where in the beginning it does have that kind of ceremonial, official feel, but then it changes right in the middle. He was my north, my south, my east and west. That concatenation of sounds right there becomes a gear shift in the middle of the poem, whereas before it had been all blah, 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 blah. Stop all the clocks, cut off the telephone, prevent the dog from barking with a juicy bone. That sort of stayed marching behind a funeral kind of cadence that is stately, that is almost automatic. Like in a funeral when you're just going on automatic behaviors, where you can't deal with your grief, and so you just fall in with, what am I supposed to do now? And now what am I supposed to do now? And you just sort of go through the steps without dealing with the grief. But that grief is there, and it hits in that third stanza. He was my north, my south, my east, my west, which, yes, has that cadence, but the intensity is so amplified at that moment that it pushes against the cadence. It pushes against that stately feel so that it becomes intimate. My working week and my Sunday rest, my noon, my midnight, my talk, my song. It's a kind of flailing at that point. It's desperately grasping to express something, to express the loss, to express the grief, to express the inexpressible at this point. And that heartbreaking last line of that third stanza, I thought that love would last forever. I was wrong. Now, there's so much that is so evenly metrical throughout this poem, such a steady drum beat throughout, even when it is getting intense. My noon, my midnight, my talk, my song. I thought that love would last forever breaks that. It is no longer so even. It pushes that so that just that one line, whereas so many of the other lines are segmented into evenly divisible chunks, that one, I thought that love would last forever, comes as one because it is so raw, it is so unprocessed, it is so deeply felt that it can't be broken down. And it ends the line, it resolves into that simple statement, I was wrong. Heartbreaking. The stars are not wont to now put out every one, pack up the moon and dismantle the sun, pour away the ocean and sweep up the wood, for nothing now can ever come to any good. That is another deep contrast. You look at the third stanza and it is enormous, and this guy is everything to the poet. This person is everything, and the poet is feeling everything about him. My north, my south, my east and west, my working week and my Sunday rest, my noon, my midnight, my talk, my song. Everything is concentrated in that one person. And everything in the third stanza becomes nothing in the fourth. The stars are gone. Put out every one. Pack up the moon and dismantle the sun. Pour away the ocean. The ocean itself is now nothing. And sweep up the wood. For nothing now can ever come to any good. Again, metrically a little complicated, a little jagged, a little raw and unprocessed, but that repetition also of that nothing sound, nothing now, hammering it home, nothing now. And so much of this poem is about sound, that funereal sound, the mourning that comes. Let aeroplanes circle moaning overhead. He uses the phrase or the term aeroplanes instead of airplanes. Each one you can make an argument about, well, the English and that era, okay, fine. But aeroplanes makes a deliberate choice to insert that extra O sound in there. Aeroplanes moaning overhead, to have that dull, painful sound in there that pops up again, I would say, in wood and good at the end, and nothing now, and ocean come. All of these funereal sounds coming out in the poem that are mixing around and creating this effect, so that all of the turbulence, all of the uncertainty mimics the emotional state of mourning, the erraticism of it, the kind of manic depressive quality of it is reminiscent of what it's like to lose someone very important to you. The highs that are expressed in he was my north, my south, my east and west makes you think that, okay, whoever this person is, they are perhaps a little emotional. They get swept up in love. But the flip side of that is that the emotions can turn and take on a tragic quality as well. And that is, I would say, framing. The tragic is framing the love. The first two stanzas are dwelling on the tragic in a kind of public and official and detached way almost. But then the last one is again on that level of intensity, of intimacy. But within that is the kernel of the joy. He was my north, my south, my east, my west, my working weekend, my Sunday rest, my noon, my midnight, my talk, my song. I thought that love would last forever. And at that moment, my love would last forever. It sounds so hopeful. And then it crashes again into that line, that fragment of a line, that tag of a line, I was wrong, which brings you back into the downbeat tragedy of it all, the pain, the suffering, the uncertainty. So even if you are saying that, well, okay, this person's kind of emotional and gets caught up and they'll meet somebody else, and they always will, but there is that inevitability that, okay, there will be joy, but will it always end the same way? Will it always end in tragedy, in sadness, in loss and grief? The placement of that is suggestive. The idea that it starts off kind of funereal, starts off kind of formal, and like you're going to a funeral. You put on dark clothing, you show up somewhere, you act decorously, you nod, you make polite conversation perhaps at a wake or something, and within that, yeah, you're gonna have some laughs probably. You're at a wake or a shiva or whatever it is, you're gonna remember the good times, and yeah, everybody's gonna laugh a little bit and it's gonna feel good. But then there's always the return to the loss, the grief. The poem ends with the grief, not with the joy. It doesn't say that, well, okay, we're going to go through the grief and then come out of it and then there's going to be joy again. It's not hopeful like that. It is the return to the grief. It just numerically, of 4 stanzas, 3, arguably more than 3, are about the loss, are dwelling on the pain. And it's only and the joy is then only referenced within that frame of pain. So where do you put your faith? Where do you lean on in this moment of loss to get through it? The poem is uncertain in that. The poem is, I would say, suggestive that the norm is to feel pain, either at this moment or at all moments. But it becomes a question, I would say, of balance. If somebody can be your north, your south, your east, your west, your working weekend, Sunday rest, if somebody can be that for even just an instance, is it worth the loss? Is it worth the pain? Does that one candle in the darkness provide enough glow for a lifetime? The poem doesn't really say. That's up for all of us to figure out on our own.